Howdy everybody, this is Omar, your audio amigo, here today with another Amigo review for you guys. Today we're going to be looking at an IEM that I've been talking about for the last several reviews. It's the follow-up to the wildly popular Dunu Titan S. It's the Dunu Titan S2, released last year and priced at $80 US. With the same shape and sort of style as the crowd favorite from several years ago, and quite frankly a killer accessories package similar to the Kima 2, how does the Titan S2 stack up versus the competition today? Well, let's find out. As usual, a quick disclaimer. This Titan S2 was sent to me by HiFiGo for review. I am not being paid for this review, but because I could turn around and sell this if I wanted to, I've gone ahead and activated the paid promotion feature here on YouTube. Again, I do these disclaimers because I believe in full transparency when there's potential bias besides my own personal taste at play. Thank you very much to HiFiGo for sending me this set for review, and thank you all for your support. Starting things off with the unboxing experience, it's actually extremely similar to its big sister, the Kima 2. You don't get the lovely acrylic stand, but what you do get is basically everything else. You get a very similar case with the Dunu logo inlaid on it to the one that you find on the Kima 2, and inside this you'll find the IEMs themselves, the cable, a shirt clip, which I always like, a 4.4mm modular adapter for the cable, and you will also find in packaging 4 sets of ear tips, which are similar to the ones on the Kima 2, but slightly different. Instead of getting the sort of blue core vocal enhancement tips, you get a set of these slightly wider bore standard gray silicone tips. You get the red balance tips that you found on the Kima 2. You get a full set of Dunu's candy ear tips, again, just like on the Kima 2, and a full set of Dunu's famous SNS tips, which a lot of people really, really like. Same case as on the Kima 2, really. I like this case design. As I said, it's big enough for you to fit some players or a dongle DAC in here. This top mesh pocket's actually usable because it extends a decent amount. I'm not a fan of this strap here. I kind of wish you could cut it out because it makes fitting anything down here a bit more difficult, and then putting the IEMs on top of it, it just doesn't feel right. But the inside is soft, the case is well built. Overall, I like it. You don't get the IEM booties or the cleaning brush. I think for this all-metal body, the booties would have been a nice touch. But this is $80, and the Kima's 120. So overall, I think at this price, I think this is an absolutely bonkers accessories package that adds a lot of value to this IEM. So let's take a closer look at that cable. And if you've seen my Kima 2 review, you'll kind of know that I'm not the biggest fan of this cable. The bottom half still has that stiff sort of shoelace sheath material that I really don't care for. It's difficult to wrap and keep under control. The top half is, like I said on the other one, it's better. It's sort of normal. It's not as microphonic as the bottom half. But it also has these clear plastic 2-pin connectors to go with the sort of aesthetic of the Titan S2. And I feel like these would go better with the rest of the IEM if they were metal. I just don't think the plastic looks very good. Also, the stereo indicators are extremely difficult to make out. It's not a huge issue with these because I believe they come already attached to the cable when you get them out of the box, but it's still, a little bit more difficult to see than I typically would like. On the plus side, it is using Dunu's awesome Q-Lock Mini modular system, and those rubber ear hooks are, very comfortable. They're easy to wear. They fit well on top of the ears. On the downside, this cable still is difficult to manage. The bottom half can be microphonic if you're rubbing it on things, and I'm just not a fan of the sort of cheap-looking 2-pin connectors overall. So yeah, I would call this cable sort of a mixed bag. It does get better with repeated wrappings, but it still isn't what I would call ideal. Honestly, Dunu, if you're watching, just use the cable that you used on the DaVinci. That cable is way better than this one and has all the same great, usability and modular features. So let's get into the construction of these. Like its predecessor, the Titan S2 features a full metal build, nicely machined. But unlike its predecessor, it only comes in one finish instead of like the 3 different finishes the Titan S2 came in. The only option for you is this chromed metal with the red accents. You've got a red nozzle, you've got a red cap there, which we'll talk about in a second. Nozzles have a fine metal mesh on them. They appear to be screwed into the lower part of the shell. In terms of ventilation, you've got The typical hole right there, right above the driver, and you've got another one over here over by the 2-pin connector. That meant I didn't have any driver flex or pressure issues with these, single dynamic, well vented, no problems. On the faceplate, as I was mentioning, this used to be a vent on the original Titan S, and here it has sort of been sealed off with this red cap. We'll see how that affects the sound. The seam between the top and bottom halves of the shell is pretty even. It's not perfect. It does catch my fingernail in some places. But the important thing is it doesn't stick out obviously, and it doesn't cause any discomfort in the ears. This is a very solidly, very quality feeling IEM. Like most metal shells at this or a higher price point, this should easily be able to survive a drop or two. I think it's very well built. Good job, Dunu. Moving on to the specifications. Like the Titan S, the S2 is powered by a single dynamic driver with what Dunu is referring to as a high rigidity dome diaphragm. The shells come in at 10 grams each, which is a little weighty, but normal for full metal shells. The nozzles aren't what I would describe as enormous. In fact, I think they're a little bit below average in size for my collection, which is good. In terms of drivability, I had no issues pushing these with my CD player or my Sony Xperia X compact phone, so I don't really recommend you to get a DAC or a dongle DAC just for these. Since this is a single dynamic with no passive filtering going on, the frequency response doesn't change with impedance adapters or when using high output impedance sources, so no worries there. All things considered, fairly typical for a all-metal single DD IEM at this price point. And now it's time for the cool wall. We've had several all-metal shelled IEMs in a row, and like I keep saying, they tend to be either sleek and understated or showy and attention-grabbing, and these T1000 looking shells are definitely going to end up in cool for me. Some people might think that these are childish or silly looking, but honestly, I really like the liquid metal Terminator aesthetic. It looks really futuristic. From some angles, it's really cool looking. I think it works well. I do wish that this was available in the matte black or matte gray textures of the original Titan S. I think it would make for a lot easier, personalization options there. But this is still a cool looking IEM in my opinion. But you're not here for my opinion. You're here to see if any of the members of the Council of Ladies are fans of Terminator 2. I personally don't think the Titan S2's futuristic looks will do well here, but I've been wrong before. It looks like they're leaning negative in terms of pretty. Only one positive remark here, with the others split between meh and not pretty, so I guess I called that one right. In terms of compliments, it turns into a 1-to-4 split, which is interesting. It looks like lady number 5 thinks they're pretty, but wouldn't compliment you on them, while lady number 1 doesn't necessarily think they're pretty, but she would compliment you on them. As we can see from their thoughts, though, all of that is explained here. So yeah, interesting results here. I think I predicted their responses pretty well, but I wasn't expecting the sort of flip-floppiness between pretty and compliment happening. In terms of comfort, the Terminator boots or robot hairdryer looking S2s, actually worked really well for me. The shape might not be very conventional, but it fits in my ears very well. The weight wasn't a problem for me. I was able to wear them for extended periods of time without having to adjust them too much. Like I said, the shape might not be conventional, but it really didn't cause any sore spots or problem areas in my ears. There was no, uncomfortable rubbing. The shape might not have been an issue for me, but it was for my wife. She wound up failing these on the tiny ears test pretty quickly. The unique shape on these didn't do anything to help them stay in her ears, and the weight of the shells meant that they were constantly, sliding out of her ears, wiggling around, and threatening to fall out. Maintaining a seal was very difficult, and she just didn't agree with the fit on these overall. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and talk about how these sound to me. So, the Titan S2's bass, I would say, the sub bass is sort of neutral-ish, and then it has a bit of a mid-bass boost going. It's not absurdly thumpy or crazy thumpy, but you definitely feel it in the music. The Twilight Guardians cover of Madonna's La Isla Bonita has this dark, rumbly bass guitar that plays at the beginning and then for the rest of the track. And I feel like the Titan S2 gives it good presence and depth without having that bass guitar dominate the replay. As I mentioned in terms of sub-bass, it's a more neutrally sub-bass presentation. It still rumbles if the song calls for it. For example, Pendulum Slam has plenty of those low-frequency drops. I still feel like it's moving decent air in the ears with the Titan S2, but it's more what I would describe as an accurate bass presentation rather than a rumbly, powerful bass presentation. Overall, I would say it's accurate, dynamic sounding bass with a pretty satisfying mid-bass boost. The mid-range on the Titan S2 isn't really tonally bothered by that mid-bass boost. Male vocals and instruments are clean and clear, and I didn't counter any obvious issues with masking in my testing. Manas Corazón Espinado featuring Santana sounded really great on the Titan S2. Fer Olvera's vocals came through really nicely. The guitars, organs, drums, and the bass guitar all going on at one time. They were very easy to separate and pick out without having to focus too much on the track. Excellent replay. Female vocals are what I would call natural with no added nasal tonality or extra emphasis. Cyndi Lauper sounds great in Time After Time. And while I don't feel like her voice is miles above the instruments, the opposite isn't true either. It's very balanced. Her voice sounds gentle and emotional without being too far forward or too far back in the mix. It's a very balanced and controlled mid-range overall. I really like it. As has been the case for the last several reviews, the upper mids and treble here are a little boosted, but not quite to the point where I personally find them fatiguing. The Titan S2 is a little bit on the bright side, but I think it balances that well with that mid-bass boost. It's a good contrast of sounds. I feel like female vocal harmonics are very well represented here. It'll add a good layer of detail to the vocals. The backing choir in Tsunamaki Watame's What an Amazing Swing has a lot of airy, breathy backing vocals, especially during the first verse. They add a lot of dimension to the track here without becoming piercing or overwhelming. I think it's a very controlled upper female harmonic presentation here. To go along with that, the Titan S2 also has some good airiness to help cymbals stand out in what I would say is a very good way. The hi-hats and crash cymbals in Green Day's Holiday have a wonderful presence on this set. I feel that instrument harmonics in general are excellently executed here. If you're treble sensitive, this might be too much for you. I think it's okay for me, but like I said, if you're treble sensitive, tread lightly. I think the Titan S2 has very controlled treble, and I think it's nice. As far as technical performance goes, the Titan S2 doesn't disappoint me either. At the low end, the driver has enough sort of gumption for low frequency details like the very low bass notes at the beginning of Massive Attack's Angel. I don't feel like the Titan S2 is lacking in sub-bass at all. It's just more subdued than on warmer sets, and with the mid-bass boost, it just feels a little bit lighter. It's not a bad thing, it's just, it's definitely still there. As far as the other end of the spectrum goes, the Titan S2 sort of bright tilt means that it pushes great details forward so that they're a little bit easier to hear. The quite excellent triangle work that's going on in the back of Quincy Jones's Soul Bossa Nova is a great example. The triangle is always there, whereas on some other headphones you kind of have to focus to hear the little metallic tinge throughout the track. The Titan S2 doesn't have that. It's just sort of there whether you're looking for it or not, which I think is kind of nice. While the Titan S2 doesn't have the driver to match the Kima 2 in terms of overall technical performance, it definitely keeps up with the rest of the peers in its price range, like the CVJ Chue, for example. When it comes to stereo separation, the Titan S2 does extremely well. My usual Mediterranean Sundance test replays very well on this set, and the extra brightness helps with the sense of separation. I got no closed-in claustrophobic feeling on that track. I think it did fairly well. In terms of Soundstage, Oscar Peterson's Night Train, as a common mentioned last video, it is on my testing tracks, thank you for reminding me. Great album to listen to for this sort of thing. On Titan S2, the replay is great. You've got Ed Thigpen on the drums, sort of behind you and to the right. You've got Ray Brown and his bass, sort of to your immediate left. And then Oscar himself is front and center on the piano. Titan S2 came off to me as excellent when it comes to stereo separation and 3D soundstage. Right in line with other single DD sets at this price, maybe a little bit better. So, the Titan S2. It comes off to me as a sort of bright-leaning, slightly V-shaped IEM. As I've mentioned in the other reviews where this was being used as a comparison set, the Titan S2 is the brightest of the sort of Kima 2, Chue, and EW300 comparison sets that I've been putting it with. So while I still have the Chue around here, and a bunch of other sets, I figured I'd line up some brighter comparison sets, and sadly, no, I do not have the original Titan S. I'm very sorry to disappoint you. I know there are a lot of folks who actually prefer the original Titan S to this one. I wanted to see if I could try it out, but it just wasn't in the cards for this review, so hopefully I'll do like a follow-up review of the Titan S original and see how it compares then. First off, we have a sort of budget sound-alike. This is the CVJ NightElf, priced at $30. I have the waifu shells and the Damascus cable on here because I think they actually go rather well together. But the NightElf does a pretty good job at giving you the Titan S2-ish experience. I do prefer the way the Titan S2 executes this sound signature. It's smoother, more musical, the treble is better executed, it's not as peaky. This is just a better version of this. This, however, is less than half the price, and if you can't really afford the S2, I think the NightElf is a good compromise at less than half the price. Moving up a little bit in price, we come to the Zhulinniao Qinglan Z4, priced at $45. I do not have my Z4 here with me. It is currently out on loan. This is one of the last sets that I did comparison listening to before I sent it out for review. In the future, I'll mention when it's graph talk versus actual in-ear comparisons. So this is one of the last in-ear comparisons I was able to do. The Z4 compared to the Titan S2 is straight up bright. It's not packing the same sort of mid-bass punch that the Titan S2 has, but it provides a very similar upper mid-range and treble experience when compared to the Titan S2. The Z4 can be a little bit too much for some ears, and I found that while the Titan S2 is close in terms of overall energy, it's just that little bit cleaner, that little bit better executed, and it's a bit less fatiguing in the treble overall compared to the Z4. That said, if you're looking for this sort of treble execution and you want to spend less than $50, the Z4 is still a pretty great option. Just be prepared to give up some of that bass thumpiness that the Titan S2 also has. Next up, priced at between $80 and $90 depending on where you're shopping, is the old stalwart, the EA500LM from Simgot. When I described the Titan S2 as being kind of V-shaped with a bright tilt, the EA500LM is a straight-up bright V-shape. Even with the gold sort of relaxed, slightly more chilled-out nozzles, the EA500LM carries a brighter sound signature than the Titan S2. And while the Titan S2 has that sort of punchy mid-bass boost going on, the EA500LM has more sub-bass, making for a rumblier, deeper experience down there. The mid-bass is also good, but it's not as punchy as on the Titan S2. I do personally find the EA500 to be a bit more revealing, a bit more resolving, a bit more detailed than the Titan S2, but you pay for that by getting something that's less punchy in the mid-bass and also a bit more fatiguing. The Titan S2 is a more dynamic listening experience when it comes to the mid-bass, and while it might be fatiguing for some folks, it's not quite as fatiguing as the 500LM. Finally, at $200, we have the gorgeous CVJ X Angel Ears Yukimi. And I feel like once again, we've kind of found a budget version of the Yukimi here with the Titan S2. The Titan S2 has a bit more of a mid-bass boost going on, and the vocals aren't as forward as they can be on the Yukimi, but this is still sort of similar-ish. That tuning difference gives me the impression that the Yukimi is cleaner, more analytical, more resolving, but the Titan S2 is, again, the punchier, more dynamic-sounding IEM, and it's crucially much, much cheaper. The Yukimi is still a fantastic set, but I think it's fun to see those sort of sub-$100 single dynamics that mimic the tuning on the 200-plus sort of upper-end dynamics. I think it does pretty well here versus the Yukimi. Which one you prefer will be down to your sound choice and your budget. So, quick sum up of everything. You've got the CVJ NightElf, 30-ish bucks. It's close to the Titan S2, but it doesn't execute the tuning as well. It's a bit less mature in terms of the overall sound signature. The Qinglan Z4 is a very close match at the top end, but this is more for people who want a completely neutral bass presentation with the same level of brightness. The EA500LM is a bit more V-shaped, it's rumblier, more resolving, also more fatiguing and slightly brighter, so tread lightly if you're treble sensitive. And finally, the Yukimi is this set's sort of closest analog in terms of overall tuning. It's sort of the higher end equivalent-ish, if you like, of this one. But overall, I think the Titan S2 represents a very solid value in the space. Alrighty, so with the comparisons finished, let's go ahead and see where the Titan S2 is going to wind up on the Audio Amigo Arbitrary rating scale. The accessories package here is amazing. The build quality is extremely good, the sound is solid, and the price is right. Then why am I not sort of feeling super hyped up by the Titan S2? Honestly, I don't think it stands out all that much in the market compared to some of the other like $75 to $90 IEMs. The accessories package here will 100% be worth it to some people. But remember, the 2-pin connectors on this cable are not exactly standard, so it might not go super well with whatever IEM you're going to pair it with. So I don't think this is an ideal buy it for the cable IEM. I think the Kima 2 is better for that, but that's $40 more. I think this IEM competes well with the other options in the price range, but for me personally, it just doesn't win a lot of those battles outright. Because of that, I'm going to put the Titan S2 in the but I like this tier, because I really do like it. But if I have a friend who's asking me for an IEM recommendation sort of in this price point, it'll have to be a sort of specific person for me to recommend the Titan S2 over some of the other options in this price range. That's a fantastic segue into the recommendation. What specific person would I recommend for the Titan S2? Well, it wouldn't be a bass head. The S2 is just a bit lacking in sub-bass for their tastes. It also isn't for a full-on treble head. It has very nice treble, but it's not maybe as energetic as some people would have. It also has too much mid-bass for them. I think they would prefer a more neutral bass presentation. Speaking of neutral, people who love neutral, kinda. It's got a bit too much mid-bass for that. And the boosted highs make it, like I said, a bit more bright V-shaped leaning, so maybe not. This tuning, I do think, is a good all-rounder. The build quality and accessories are solid, and while the tuning might be a bit sort of old-schoolish, I think that this would be a good first IEM for someone who's looking to get into the market at around $80. Compared to some of the other options out there, the varied set of tips would let new users experience tip rolling without having to drop money on other, tips to try. And the metal shells will likely survive drops and scrapes better than some of the resin shelled alternatives. I feel like this also makes a good budget alternative to the Yukimi, or they're a good upgrade pick from something like the NightElf, as the tuning is similar but more refined. If you are completely new to the hobby, I would really only pick this up if you know you like the sort of tuning on other headphones, or you maybe borrowed some IEMs from other people, or if you have the NightElf and you're looking to upgrade to something with a sort of similar signature and you don't really want to drop the sort of cash that you need to spend on the Yukimi. But that's going to do it for my Titan S2 review. I do have the Brain Dance and a couple of Dunu DACs that I want to take a look at in some future videos. Nothing concrete or solid planned for those. The Brain Dance is really interesting. It's going to be a good one to talk about. But for now, thank you very much to HiFiGo for sending this out for review. Thank you to you all very much for watching. That's been it. This has been Omar with Audio Amigo Reviews, and I will catch you all next time.